Nate and I are here for Trosky Tuesday. We thank you guys for joining us. Hopefully you can keep us on and go back and forth between the game, or maybe come back and check us out later. As always, we have a interesting topic and a very important topic. I think once we get into it, you're truly going to understand just how important it really is. The power of response in infield play. The power of response in infield play. But before we get there, of course, got to thank our sponsors, soldiersports.us, great sportswear and apparel. Give them a check out. Steve Springer with Quality at Bats. Steve is unbelievable on the mental side. I saw tweets going out today where he's been in Texas coaching some people up on the mental side. Alan Jager with Jager Sports and J Bands. Arm care from A to Z. So couple updates on Nate and I, what's going on at the ranch. Basically, we have our next infield camp. It's on tap for Atlanta, Georgia on November 7th and 8th. I want to make sure I had that right. In Gainesville, Georgia, not Gainesville, Florida, Gainesville, Georgia, which is North Georgia near the Buford, Lake Lanier area. Beautiful North Georgia at an amazing complex. We will be up there. Registration is open at troskyranch.com. Of course, you don't want the virtual camp. You want the live camp. So make sure you choose the correct option there. XM radio shows in full swing. I think we finished our 6. It's hard to keep track. Last week, we got another show coming up this weekend on channel 211, the Dan Patrick channel. It's been really, really cool getting to do that. Really enjoyed doing that with you, Nate. That's been a lot of fun. So tonight we got a big one, and I think there might be an opportunity for the audience to shoot some questions in tonight. So if you feel compelled, please type them in, and Tony Hildy will text them over to me because we can't see the Facebook feed as we're doing the show. It's me and Nate, my double play combo. So Nate, I'm going to turn it over to you and start taking us down this journey of response, the power of response in infield play.
So we're going to talk about response, and we're going to apply it also to the whole field of all positions, from Mookie Betts in the outfield to Walker Buehler on the mound. We're going to move the topic. It's going to relate specifically to infield play, but also to all positions. So it's a beneficial topic for coaches, players, players that also play other positions. So the power of response, our ability to respond, it's our responsibility as players, and we have a choice. And that choice often isn't taught to us when we're younger as a player. Not only how do we respond when we make mistakes, but how do we respond when our teammates make mistakes? And when you look at this series, right, both teams have come from 3-0 to a 3-1 comeback to game 7. And what you see is you see an imperfect game. You see imperfect perfection. The players are out there striving for perfection, but it's definitely an imperfect game. When you look at moves that some of the managers have made, you look at how players, some of the best players in the game are deficient at the plate. Even Mookie Betts in one of the early games, he failed to make a play in the outfield, and the interviewers talked to him, and they said, "Hey, you know what happened on that play?" He said, "I made a mistake." He said, "But I'm going to come back." And you know what happened the next few nights? He had game-winning catches. So how did he respond? We call it response and recovery. How do you respond? How do you recover? So Mookie Betts right now, he doesn't have his bat. He doesn't have his best showing at the plate. You have Cody Bellinger struggling at the plate. Let's go back to Mookie. So Mookie took something, a negative, he made it a positive. So basically it was a negative positive experience. And he is one of the reasons why the Dodgers are in the World Series tonight, is because of his responses, his ability to recover. And, you know, these are things that we take for granted. We take them for granted as coaches. We just expect everybody to have a great bounce back. We expect them to have a great mental game. And Trent, we were talking about before the show, your own experiences as a player, and how seldom would someone actually meet your needs mentally, because oftentimes they don't even know. It's the invisible, it's the unseen. You know, and rarely does a coach invest the time to take the time. And the higher up you go in this game, guys, no one will invest in you. It's just you get it done, or the next guy's waiting in line and you're done. When we think of Walker Buehler, when he got out. It was 3-1 series. Buehler's on the mound, bases loaded with nobody out, and he was on. And in past those types of experiences, he struggled as a young pitcher. And they asked him at the end of the game, when they won the game, they said, Walk, how did you have this calmness about you? Where did that come from? And he said, it came because I don't fear failure anymore. He said, it came because of my past failure. He said, I failed before. And you think of the environment that the Dodgers have created. We're going to call it soil. We're going to compare it to the different soils that you can plant a seed in. And when you think of the soil that the Dodgers have created, it's a fertile soil. When you think of Mookie Betts struggling at the plate, but what happens? He's still in the game. Why is he in the game? Because people they're building him up even though he doesn't have his A game. And you think of Cody Bellinger, right? Struggling. He would have been written off, Trent. He was already written off, actually. And Dave Roberts was written off probably to lose his job when they're down 3-1. Dave Roberts, you can't manage and you're done. Cody Bellinger, you can't hit. And Mookie, you can't hit either. Well, what happens when you have this soil, this fertile soil? When we talk about soils, you have the hard soil. When you try to plant a seed in a hard soil, there's no result. When you plant a seed in a shallow soil that's shallow, there's no result. When you plant a seed in a bed of rocky soil, there's no result. And when you have a fertile soil of unconditional love, unconditional acceptance, and guys finding ways to help their team win, being difference makers, and the Dodgers are a great example of that, of how to respond and not nitpick at the little things, find ways to win. And we were talking before the show. You're talking about your own experiences as a player, about being in baseball and not having the support that you felt that could have even taken your game to another level.
Yeah, I was, it's really simple. I did not have a person in my high school career that basically gave me permission to fail, or Nate, just put perspective to the game. Okay. I literally expected myself to be perfect every time I went out on the field. That was my expectation. And if I wasn't perfect, I literally beat myself up. And to make things worse, if I actually made some mistakes, they would stay with me like for days and days. In high school, you don't play every day. So it's not like college or professionally where you get right back out there and get at it again. It's like you get to harbor it, and when you have confidence and feel like you're a good player, but yet you're struggling and things aren't going well, it's very easy to spiral out of control, like in a negative mindset. And those mistakes beget mistakes because we play with more tension. We fear being taken out of the game. We fear what our teammates are thinking about us. And, it becomes very, very dangerous. And I literally, Nate, my junior year, probably my worst year in baseball altogether. I spent many nights wide awake, literally just wanted to stay at the field, didn't even want to go home after the game because I just wanted work. I wanted practice. And that was another part. I wasn't really getting the preparation through my coach, my head coach at the time. We had a good assistant. They weren't preparing us. I wasn't getting the quality reps. So I was like so hungry to be good. I had goals. I wanted our team to win. And it just wasn't being fed. I wasn't being fed physically, and I wasn't being fed mentally. And I had to figure a lot of things out myself. And like you and I talk about all the time, never reached my ceiling as a player, because when I did finally figure a lot of this out, it was late. And even some of it that could have helped me tremendously had I known it at a much earlier age. I never figured out as a player. I only learned it as a coach. So go ahead.
What I want the listeners to understand too, that you're a Division I shortstop, and you are, I think you led your conference. I think you were conference player of the year, and you also signed a professional contract. So this is the point that I think that needs to be made. Very few players reach their ceiling. And the reason is we don't address the invisible. We don't address the unseen, and we take it for granted. And, you're an elite player, but when we interview and we talk to the elite, they struggle just like the players. The reason why typically the elite can survive is because they're better athletes. but they rarely reach their ceiling. I want to take us into the story. Tonight's story really is about a pitcher and an infielder, and it goes back and forth. So it's 1959. The Pittsburgh Pirates are playing the Milwaukee Braves. And trivia question, if someone wants to throw it in there, when did the Milwaukee Braves become the Atlanta Braves? What year? You can't look at your phone. You can't ask Siri. And then when did the Milwaukee Brewers become the Milwaukee Brewers? So we'll give you about 5 seconds to maybe send that into Tony. So you have the Milwaukee Braves and you have the Seattle Pilots, which that's where the Milwaukee Brewers came from. It was 1969. The Milwaukee Brewers became an expansion team. So they came out of nowhere. They were the Seattle Pilots. The Pilots became the Milwaukee Brewers in 1970. And then you have the Milwaukee Braves. They became the Atlanta Braves in 1966. So a little trivia for you. And you were a Brave. You were an Atlanta Brave. And one of our guests 2 weeks ago was a Brave. So in congratulations to the Braves having a great run. So we have the Pittsburgh Pirates playing against the Milwaukee Braves, and it's the greatest game ever pitched in the history of the game. Harvey Haddix was on the mound. He's a 5'9" lefty, and he was a 3-time All-Star, 20-game winner, and he had a fastball and a slider, and he was going into the 13th inning. He had 12 perfect innings. Perfection. No one ever even touched. How many guys can go 12 innings first and foremost? And then how many guys are having perfect games with 12 innings? Ridiculous. Well, the result did not finish the way Harvey planned. So he goes into the 13th. The first batter, the leadoff batter, hits a ground ball to Dan Hoax. And Big Dan at third base booted it. He made an error. And what happened was Harvey lost his focus. He gave up 3 runs that inning, and it was game over. He gave up 1 hit in 13 innings, 12 innings of perfect baseball. The game is over and he loses. And later he was in the clubhouse and he walked over to Dan, his third baseman, and he said, "Hey, Dan, don't even sweat it." He put his hand on his shoulder. He said, "You missed that ball in the 13th. Don't sweat it, brother." He said, "You know why? Because you're going to make a lot more plays for me down the road. Don't even worry about it." He tapped him on the back and he walked away. That is the soil we're talking about, giving players the freedom to fail. And that is a rare, I played on 3 different college teams. I'm a junior college player. I went to Division I on a scholarship and things didn't work out. So I ended up going NAIA. And in all 3 environments, I never felt that type of freedom to go out and have the freedom. So what happens is it allows you to focus on the main thing, because the main thing is to make plays, right, Trent? And if you can have no concern, if you can be unaffected by making mistakes, absolutely unaffected, and you have no concern in your mind of what your teammates might think, what your father might think, what your coaches might think, what the media might think, what the opposing team might think, what anybody thinks, once you can release that concern, you reach your peak performance. But only then does that happen. And most players never play with that freedom, unaffected. I make a mistake, I don't even know. So what? Don't care. So what? Now what? I'm ready for the next play. And that is a very rare player. And that is elite thinking. That's the 1 to 5%. And we've been interviewing guys over the last 6 months, talking to major league players, talking about how they struggle. And you think of the lack of being affected, those guys getting affected and being concerned from making mistakes. And I think of the LA Dodgers, you think of Dave Roberts. Dave's son was on my travel team, so I got to know his son and Dave as well. And they have like a Southern California Dominican spirit of just freedom. There's no pressure. There's no worry. Dave had no pressure on his son. His son ended up committing to LMU on a baseball scholarship to a Division I school in Southern California about 2 years ago. But he had this freedom, and you see it in the dugout, this freedom. So I didn't experience it, very rarely. And the coaches that were good in my corner, Trent, usually they were either jerks or they didn't say anything. And the unspoken word is also, can be very damaging.
There's so many angles that we can take with this. I mean, the first thing that comes to mind is your parents. Really, the response mechanism starts at home. Like how mom and dad even handle the adversity that's happening on the field. They set the precedence, and we've talked about this before. And the emotion and logic. They're opposing forces. Okay. Logic and emotion, opposing forces. And when parents get emotional, if they don't have the right perspective, it skews everything, and it changes the mindset of their son or their daughter. And so now they're being impacted by forces outside the playing field. Then you get onto the playing field, and our response can be dictated by our coach. It can be dictated by other players on the team. Really a family atmosphere. I just really believe, Nate, that the more we study this and the more I talk about it, being able to literally let people know that it's okay and mean it, and not give them some sort of speech when they make a mistake, but like maybe when they come in the dugout, just go over there and give them a pat on the rear end in an appropriate way, or put your arm around them and say, hey, we got you, man. You know what I mean? We got you. We believe in you. And I think that can just magnify the positive reaction and get people back on track. Your story was a beautiful one. I mean, how easy would it have been for the pitcher to be unbelievably selfish? His night, we just lost you there, Nate, for a second, your video. His night, perfect game, 12 innings, and the third baseman makes an error. The body language could have been horrible from the pitcher, the dirty looks, especially after the game was lost, pointing fingers, transfer of blame, all these things that good teams and good teammates don't do. So we got to continue to dive into this. And then, the takeaways are big here to me, big.
I think on that point, when you're talking about the outside forces that are influencing between the lines, and that's a major problem. And every player that I've worked with over the last 30 plus years, I've worked with thousands. Every player that struggled with the mental game, it all stemmed from their relationship, from either their mom or their father putting expectations on them that are not realistic, not understanding this game. Great players make errors. Let's make errors because it's the game, right? When you talk about all the time, we're competing against the game. Let's make errors because it's a tough game, not because we're tight and we have the voice of doubt in our head and we're double-minded and unsure of ourselves, which over 50% of the time, a large percentage of infielders are playing with the voice of doubt. That is a product of unfertile soil. And that comes from, like you said, I'm telling you, I've seen it so many times. Every talented player that did not make it, even in college, that they got scholarships, but what happened is their scholarships at some point were either revoked or they became bench guys because they didn't have the sixth tool. And that comes from the father figure mostly, but also from the mother figure too. I firsthand, I can tell you I'm not going to say any names, but mothers that don't have clear expectations and understanding of the difficulty of this game, being too hard on their kids, and you can see it. The players lose their attack, they lose their fire because they're playing with the voice of doubt, because they're concerned about external forces, like you said. Parents understand, and I'll tell you, this weekend I was down in Los Angeles at an invite-only Major League Baseball combine. It's the first time they've done this, and they're doing 3 across the country, and there was only 20 players there, and my nephew was invited, so we went down, and there was a lot of things. So I'm sitting back as an observer. I've been scouting for over 20 years, part-time scout for over 20 years. I've been a college head coach. I've coached in the minor leagues, and I've been studying this game for 30 plus years. So yes, I do have an opinion, and I'm sitting there. I probably have more of an opinion than probably anybody about the whole game, because I understand the whole game. I understand base running. I understand base stealing. I understand the whole game, top to bottom. Most coaches don't. A lot of guys are good hitting guys, or they're good this. Well, I understand the whole game. So I'm watching the whole game. I understand every position. He was over at third base and his footwork was off. Then he's in left field. He played some center field as well in the event. And then I'm watching him shag. I mean, I have a list of 30 things that I can critique, literally. But I didn't tell him one of them yet. And we've been home for 3 days, because the timing is everything. And you want to break a player's spirit, become the police officer, become the baseball cop. And you know what happens? They don't even want to be around you. And they won't even listen, even if you're right. That's a problem. So I'm picking the time, especially separated from the event. We're probably going to do it on Saturday. We're going to go out to dinner. And I'm just going to say I have a few comments on the game. I'm going to do the positive stuff all first. And then we're going to talk a little bit about, I'll just give you one example. They were shagging, they were taking BP, and he was in the outfield talking to another guy. And there's about 60 scouts in the stands. Well, that's not good. That's not like the worst move in the world, but it's not a good move, right? You should be out there making plays in the outfield, catch some balls, show some energy, show you love the game, show you have the ability to make plays in the outfield, show that you're an athlete, show your energy.
You might not even get a fly ball during the entire game. Those might
Right.
be the only fly balls you get. You know what I mean? Show them you can take some routes, angles, get after it, separate yourself a little bit.
Right. And you think of a do or die ball in the outfield, right? You got to come through it and throw the guy out. Well, that's the same as a slow roller footwork. So you come in, and by the way, players, we're looking for athleticism and actions more than anything. We don't care what position you're playing. We could care less. If you're on the outfield and you're a first baseman and you're out there shagging, and we see flexibility and freedom and looseness and actions, we're like, man, that guy could play some third base. So anyway, so I have a checklist of like 30 things. And what I did was I waited, certain things just work themselves out. So we had a 6-hour drive home, and he would bring something up, and then I would go, man, this is a perfect time to talk about one of the topics. But it never was pointing a finger saying, hey, let me be the cop right now and tell you the things that you need to get better at. It doesn't work. So parents, this is extremely important. The mental game is a reflection. Your player's mental game is a reflection of your relationship.
Yeah, you didn't pull this one. Here's my checklist of 30 things. You know what I mean? That's it really is strategic from a parental standpoint of when and how you speak to your kids. Now, we're not saying you can't be honest. It's very important that you can assess honestly, but it's just like anything else in life. It really boils down to how you say it and when you say it. And, it's very difficult to do because as parents, and I've been one, I had a player come all the way through and play for me in high school, and, he's playing in college, and I watch his games, and it's very tempting to want to give them like continual feedback on every little thing. But part of the journey is figuring things out on your own. And part of the journey is people coming and asking for help because they're a lot more receptive. So what's the analogy that we see in pro ball, Nate? A guy goes into pro ball, he's overmatched. Instead of the coach coming right out, the hitting coach, and immediately trying to make changes, you're doing this wrong, you're doing this wrong, you're doing this wrong. And we just said that's not the way you want to go about it. What do? They let the guy try to figure it out. He may have hundreds of at-bats. And what does that player do when he continues to struggle? He goes and asks for help. Now, is he receptive to hearing what has to be said? Yes, most of the time. So that's just one example of strategy used a lot of times in professional baseball, because when you just go out, when someone's had success their whole life and they immediately start to struggle, they're not going to be really receptive to what you have to say if you're telling them they have to make changes. But if they fail enough, they're going to come, hey, Nate, can we sit down and talk? Because I don't really understand what's going on. I feel like I'm a pretty good player and I'm not handling these pitches. And now when you talk, I'm like all ears listening, right? So perspective, timing, and presenting, these responses. So, yeah.
On our Saturday show on XM Radio, we had our guest, Mac Lardner, and Mac was a teammate of Nico Horner. Nico's the second baseman for the Chicago Cubs, and Nico was the Stanford shortstop first rounder about 3 years ago in the Major League Baseball draft. And I had the opportunity to coach Nico when he was 14 up through high school, different times, different opportunities. And I've never been around a player so positive in my life. And he has this frequency and this energy. And Mac Lardner, who's now pitching with the St. Louis Cardinals in the minor leagues, he told, some stories off the air about Nico always had his back. You give up a double, it was always positive. Hey, Mac, we got you right here, baby. Roll me up a ground ball. We got you. He gives up a single. He hits a batter. He walks two. It was constant energy. It was confidence. It was empowerment. He was empowering the pitcher to stay focused and stay present and be unaffected by the environment, by the situation, by the circumstance. And that came from being a great teammate. And I'll tell you right now, when you look at his major league tools, when you look at the grading scale, the 20/80, he's not up in the 60, 70, and 80 in any categories. But I'll tell you what, from the 6 tool, from his character, from his team spirit, the dirt bag, The grinder, the dirtbag, the bulldog, the rock, and the rat, he's an 80. Literally, he's an 80. And how he plays the game, he's an 80. He's in the big leagues in 1 year out of college, 1 year, because of his spirit. And that's something we talked about it before in a past show, how you can work on anything you want. Just because you don't possess those qualities, it's a process. Just like a baby, they walk, they jog, they sprint, then they race. You don't take a baby and go run a race, right? We do the progression. You talked about the progressions of learning, right? Extremely important. And oftentimes we want to jump. We want to jump from the first to the end, and we want to make it all happen right now.
Yeah, you know, something comes to mind, Nate. The more you talk tonight, the more I think about this experience. And I know that it's come up in shows past, but sometimes we got to hear things in different lights and perspectives and scenarios for them to click. You know, Andrew Smith, I've told you about Andrew Smith. He's one of the best players that I've ever coached. And I think, you know, you earn a right to fail more than maybe we would typically allow, right? So the Mookie Bettses of the world, when he goes into a slump, he could be 0 for 20 in the World Series and he's not coming out. Why? Because he's Mookie Betts. He's a proven guy in those scenarios. They know the next at bat he might change the game. He just has to get hot. Well, Andrew was struggling, so he's a 4-year varsity starter for us in a very good program in my high school program. He's a D1 prospect for, you know, football and baseball. He's our shortstop. He's our leadoff hitter. He's tough as nails, best attitude, high energy guy. And I don't remember exactly what it was because his senior year was Tabor's freshman year. So that was 2014. And Andrew went like, Nate, he went like 1 for 20 with a bunch of strikeouts to start the high school season, which is not Andrew Smith. I mean, but he is such a proven guy. I brought Andrew over and I said, Andrew, you are not coming out of the lineup. You're going to be the leadoff guy the rest of the year. Okay. You've already proven to me over the years what you can do. Just go be you and play, you know, and you could just see like, because even guys like that start to doubt and think like, is this going to be it? If I have a bad game today, is the next game I'm going to be on the bench when I go look at them? But if that had been his first year on varsity and he's 1 for 20, he's probably coming out of the game and someone else is getting a shot, you know, right. But it's all relative, you know, but you still got to give people the permission, the perspective. If I would have had perspective, which Steve Springer does, you know, with offense, if I would have had that same mindset as a hitter and understood and redefined what actually hitting is about, barreling balls up and having quality at bats, that is the scale, you know, at which to judge yourself. And then defensively, the same thing, Nate. Like, you know, I literally expected myself to be perfect. And if I would have just understood that even the best make mistakes and just go play with freedom, you know, there's no telling. Like you said, I had a successful career in spite of my, you know, playing with some tension and self-doubt at times. But I mean, when I'm telling you, I beat myself up, I dropped a pop fly against UNC Chapel Hill with the bases loaded and 2 outs. Embarrassing. Ball went up, you know, a mile high. It was back behind me. I camped under it. It hit right off the palm of my glove. They scored a few runs, ended up beating us. And like, you know, I was like literally like wanting my coach to leave the lights on, you know, let everybody go home and go take pop flies out there. Like, I just couldn't believe, you know, but that was unnecessary. That, you know, I just needed a better perspective that stuff is going to happen. And it makes the game a lot more fun is ultimately what it does. The freedom,
right?
You know, yes.
When we interview players, I've been doing it for the last about 10 years. Since we are human and we have the human element we're dealing with, being human, it doesn't matter the age. It makes no difference. A 30-year-old is a human. A 10-year-old is a human. We're all humans. So we all struggle with being emotional, right? We're emotional beings and we're irrational beings. And so when you think of the audience, who is our audience? When you think of your teammate next to you, everybody is struggling. And I want people to really think about this, because what we do is we look at everybody and we think everybody has it together, and they don't. Nobody has it together. And this is the reason why. It's the 1154 law of thirds. It's very simple. And 11 starts out of a big leaguer's year, and not this year because it's a 60-game season, right? 11 of those starts, things are going to go wrong the whole time. The other 11, it's going to be okay. And the other 11, things are going to go great. When you divide the season up into 162, it's 54 divided by times 3 so it's a third. It's a third of the time things will go wrong. It's guaranteed. It's not like maybe. It's like it will go wrong. Look at Cody Bellinger. Look at these great players struggling because they're human beings. We first need to understand who we're dealing with. Every player is struggling. So I put the players, Trent, we're going to put them in categories of 4. The first player, and I'm going to ask you what if you can give me what you would say how they feel, like what would be an emotion of a player. So we're going to start with player number 1. Player number 1 is a rookie. You're a rookie in the big leagues, trying to find your way. You're trying to win a job. Where do you think they are emotionally? The majority of them, not like maybe Mike Trout. You know, there's a 1 to 5%, depends what team you're on, typically about 1 to 2, that are mental giants. They're elite thinkers. Where would you say the mind of a rookie is in the big leagues? You know, he's been maybe in the minor leagues for 6 years and now he's there.
Anxious and doubt.
Anxious and doubt, right? Wondering if he belongs, wondering if he will stick, wondering if he's going to go back to AAA, right? There's uncertainty. When you have uncertainty, that means there's concern. And when there's concern, there's worry. And when there's worry, there's doubt and fear, and that creates tension. And when there's tension, the body's out of sequence. So if you can't be present, completely present with the freedom, like we're talking about, giving players the freedom, but oftentimes the freedom will not come from outer sources. It has to come from within, because the higher up you go, no one's talking to you, nobody. And when you don't execute, unless you're Mookie Betts, you're done. You're either released or you're back down in the minor leagues. It's like game over. So you have the young guys. So you're either in the phase of being maybe a first-year guy, second-year guy, or maybe going up and down. Let's go to the second guy. The second guy's made it through arbitration. It's his 4th year. He just signed a multi-million-dollar contract. So what are the emotions in that guy's mind now? He just signed for $10 million a year. What is he thinking about?
He's thinking about living up to the expectation of all that money he just signed for.
Exactly. Wondering if he's worthy, thinking about what people are thinking. He has an 0 for 8. Now he's going, oh my gosh, what's going on? What is the media saying? So now he's living up to the expectation, just like you said. And many players struggle. Barry Zito was the greatest example of all. He signed for $120 million. He was the highest paid player in the game at the time. And once he signed that contract, what happened? He became one of the worst pitchers in the game for countless years. And finally, at the end, he started to build. And he was on our San Francisco Giants, our local team here. And they interviewed him. They said, Barry, what happened? He said, one thing happened, and it was only one thing. He said, literally, once I signed for $120 million, I tried to prove I was worth it. I was trying to prove that I was worth the 120. So now he started to think about things he didn't think about before. He was trying harder, which creates tension, which creates uncertainty. So we have the guy who signs the big deal, right? So we got the rookie, the young player. Then we got the guy who's in his 4th year, 5th year, 6th year. He signs a big deal. We'll go to the third guy now. The third guy is a serviceable big leaguer. He's been in the big leagues maybe 5 years. You know, he's a utility guy. He's batting about 240, 250, okay? Or he's a part-time player, okay? What is that guy concerned with?
I would guess that he's probably insecure to his value to the team. Is there another guy coming up that can do his job better? Is there really a need for that, what he can do well? And he's trying very hard to prove his worth every day.
So what happens if he's in an environment, we're talking about the soil, what happens if he's in shallow soil where it's not a fertile environment like the LA Dodgers? He's probably going to lose even more confidence, right? But if he has this encouraging environment.
Walking on eggshells every day.
Yeah. Walking on eggshells. We'll go to the 4th guy. The 4th guy is the veteran. He's the Robinson Cano. He's signed a big deal. He's Albert Pujols. He's towards the later years. He's the vet. He has a lot of money. He's making a lot of money. What is his concern?
In my opinion, he's a so what, don't care guy. I mean, he wants to keep playing. So he's got he cares, but he's proven he understands. I think he's a smarter guy. I think he's got perspective. He should after all those years. I think he's probably got it a little more together, in my opinion, probably playing with a lot more calmness than most of the other guys.
So give me his insecurity though. So why do no athletes ever want to retire? They don't want to retire and they can't retire because they have this insecurity of what? wondering if they're still good enough. They're always wondering. And what happens is they start to diminish and their confidence starts to lower. Yeah, they come to a point. I think what you said was right on for a small window.
Right.
Because it's like their 12th year and they're rolling. It's autopilot. It's instinctive mode, right? And but what happens is once they get to their 14, I mean, once Albert's halfway through his multi-million-dollar contract, he's starting to doubt every day. What are the fans thinking? What are my team thinking? Am I even good enough anymore? Should I even be out here, right? Self-doubt creeps in big time.
Adam Wainwright, who's a friend and alumni of the school that I coach at, how many years have the St. Louis fans been writing him off? He's not good enough anymore. He don't got what it takes anymore, blah, blah, blah. And he literally went out this year and last year and had two of the best years as he's had in a long time. So and he's a long time veteran, right? I think people just think, I get your point now. I mean, really, they think that you're kind of aged out and, you're not good enough anymore. You've been in it too long and you're diminishing, and they'll write you off quickly. I mean, we've seen it with Tom Brady, right? In football, even, 4 or 5 years ago, they were writing him off and he's still winning championships. So, but I think it does motivate those guys to come and prove something. They got to prove it.
Right. So when we understand our audience, we understand our teammates standing right next to us. You're playing shortstop. I'm at second. We got Tony at third. We got Brian at first, right? We got our guys on the infield. We need to understand as parents, as coaches, as players, that nobody is exempt. Nobody from the concerns and the worries of life. Nobody is at the top of the mountain. Nobody, because we have the human element we're dealing with. So what happens is when a player makes a mistake, that's Nolan Arenado. It doesn't matter. No, it does matter. Hey, Nolan, we got you, baby. You're the best fielder. You're the best. You're the best we got, Nolan. Next one's going, we got him, baby. Whatever you need to say, just speak from your heart, right? Because Nolan is a human being just like anybody else. And one of our players down in Southern California, his mother is a mental coach, a sports psych for major league players, and they hire her, basically as a private client. So she's basically for hire. And she told me recently there's 2 Gold Glove major league infielders right now that she counsels on a regular basis. They're Gold Glove, they're regular Gold Glove winners. They're guys that bat over 300. They're the best players in the game that are seeking her guidance, her mentorship, her encouragement on, I just signed for $30 million a year for $250 million. Hey, I'm human. So understand, players, the guy next to you needs you to pick him up. He's human, and we don't do that. So we're talking about response. Well, how do we respond when we make mistakes? Well, how do we respond when our teammates? And Harvey Haddix, I think, is the greatest story of all time, because Harvey pitched the greatest game in the history of the world. It's 12 perfect innings. That does not happen. It does not exist, and it will never happen again. And his third baseman, he got a loss, Trent. He gave up 1 hit in 13 innings, and he lost. And he went over to him, and he picked him up. He picked him up. And the next night, you know what happens? Harvey's making plays behind him because he trusts him, he loves him, and he knows Harvey's got his back. I mean, it's a beautiful, beautiful thing when we can create that synergy. And that's why I truly believe this series is going to be a showdown. It's going to be a battle because you have this fertile soil in both dugouts. The Tampa Bay Rays, Cashman, their manager, and you got Roberts, their manager. These guys are dudes. They get it. And they were talking, with the Rays after, with Cashman, and they were talking about, what are you guys doing here? I mean, their payroll is like what, maybe a third, if that, of the other teams. It's like, what are you doing here? And you know what he said? It was so simple. He says, man, we let our players be themselves. We don't have like this agenda. It's like we let them play and we accept them and we love them for who they are. I mean, when's the last time you heard of coaches doing that? We micromanage every move. I mean, we got story after story of coaches learning not to micromanage and they start winning championships. I mean, but that's what the Rays are about. That's what Dave Roberts is about. And we need to make it a priority in our dugouts because that synergy is real. And we're dealing with human beings that struggle with, Trent, confidence, as you know, comes and goes pitch to pitch. At bat to at bat, ground ball to ground ball. You're in the 7th inning, you lost your confidence.
Yeah, I think of the word manager, Nate. I think of the word manager versus coach. You know, and these when you're a manager, you're not only managing the game, you're managing people. It's about relationships. It's about trust. It's understanding what these players are going through, and truly exemplifying the confidence and synergy and energy that these players need. They need to see in your body language that what your words are saying is real. Because ultimately, when you make a mistake and something goes wrong, like a huge base running error, the other night in the Braves game, if the manager is in there slamming his clipboard down, huffing and puffing, all it does is create more tension for everybody on the team. But if they truly love their players, these managers, that's why so many of them really, I believe, should be former players, because they get it. They've been there, they understand. But coaches, when we say coaches, you know, underneath Major League Baseball, we call everybody coaches, and coaches, forget that they have to manage players. They want to coach, they want to tell you everything to do, and they want to control everything. And, we feed off of each other. And I just think it all goes back to treat others the way you want to be treated. And when you're in an emotional environment, when things matter and you've prepared and you put in the time and things aren't going the way that you think they should go, you find out a lot about people's character, right? We talk about adversity really reveals character as much as maybe some people think it builds character. It might over time, it reveals it. And you start to find out what people are really made out of. And who do you want to go to war with on the field every day? You want to go with guys that have an even keel and understand and aren't going to beat you up when you make a mistake, not going to make faces and point fingers and, talk behind your back. That's why the best teams have synergy. The best players have synergy coming straight from the home. The best teams usually have coaches, not always. Some teams have succeeded in spite of their coaches. That's their rallying point. They're almost like competing against their coach or whatever. But this is really, really important stuff. It's not that complicated, but I think it is easier to talk about, Nate, than it is to actually implement. Because I think when things start to go south, when we're competing, a lot of people fold mentally.
Well, the reason why they fold is because they don't have perspective of the game. They have no concept. When Muhammad Ali was in his heyday, he said, "I never thought I would lose ever." And you think of the different sports. So first of all, we need to understand we're in the greatest failure game of all time. Baseball is the greatest failure game that exists, that will ever exist. There's no game like it. So first we need to understand our game, right? We need to understand and have perspective. And once you get that perspective, it's going to change the way you respond and recover, because things won't affect you. So one, understand our game, understand boxing. Boxers will go through their whole career and maybe lose one time. Major League Baseball, how many times they lose in this condensed season? Most guys are losing 30 times. There's teams in the playoffs losing 30 times. 30 times a boxer might lose one fight his whole career. Major League teams lose on average of 75 games a season. That's on average. So if you take a guy like Hank Aaron, who played over 20 seasons, and you say, okay, he's losing over 1,000 times, and you take an NFL football player, if he's on a winning team, he might lose anywhere from 2 to 5 games a year. A major league player is going to lose 2 to 5 every single week. And Ali said, "I never thought I'd lose, but when I did, I had to learn to lose right." And the problem is we're not teaching players how to lose. Once you gain perspective of the sport that you play, losing doesn't have any power. It has no effect. And when Walker Buehler was on the mound, he says, failure has no power. It's lie. He didn't, this is in my words. He says, it has no power. It has no effect on me. When the bases were loaded with nobody out, I had no fear because I've already been there. And he gained perspective through experience. But the masters gain perspective before they get the experience. Because if you have to learn the hard way, there's a good time that your career is going to end before you get to the end. Because what happens is if you're always learning the hard way, there's a good chance you will not finish your career. Now, a guy like Walker Buehler has the opportunity, like Mookie Betts, right? Mookie Betts has the opportunity to continue to fail. But most players don't have that luxury. So we need to be great coaches, teaching perspective, teaching players how to fail. There was a Heisman Trophy winner, and he had an opportunity to go in the draft, or the football draft or the baseball draft. And they said, "What are you going to play?" And he says, "Are you kidding? What am I going to play?" What do you think he said, Trent?
Tell me, Nate.
He says, I'm not a loser. He said, losers play baseball. Those guys are losing in one season more than I lose in my whole life. Because I like to win. Because I'm not playing baseball. See, he chose his sport. Understand, players, you chose to play baseball. Baseball is a game of losers. And once you learn how to lose, that's what Springer's talking about. Basically, learn how to lose. And when it has no power, it has no effect on the next pitch, and you have the ability to keep the main thing, which is focusing on the do. I make plays. Even when I made an error, I don't even remember because my memory is so short because it has no effect because Omar Vizquel's making 10 to 15 every year, and he's the greatest of all time. Ozzie Smith's making 15 to 25 a year. And when you think of a catcher trying to throw runners out, how often do they throw guys out? When you think of Kenny Lofton, Lou Brock, these guys stealing bases, they're getting thrown out 25 to 30% of the time. They're getting thrown out, and they're the greatest that's ever walked the earth. And then you take Cy Young, he's the greatest winner, but he's the greatest loser. When you learn perspective, literally, it starts to just blow like the wind. It just keeps going. But it's perspective.
It's that so what, don't care, so what, I don't give a crap attitude that, Spring talks about. I mean, obviously we do care and we do, give a crap, but it's like your mind, it's really that reverse psychology of freedom. You got to play, and when you're talking from the high school level, I want people to understand that don't really maybe understand when Nate's talking about learning how to lose. He didn't say that you have to like it. But it's gaining perspective on winning and losing and how do you win more. When you talk about Major League Baseball, a high school season, you might go undefeated in 30 games. It happens. You can be that dominant over your competition sometimes, but you get to the higher levels, there's too much equality and there's too many factors that go on. And so you have to maintain this perspective. And that's why I think, to a large degree, you don't see major league teams, acting in the dugout like you might a college team, because they have to keep perspective, the wins and the losses, and keep their mindset on the big picture and where they're trying to go. If you drop 2 games or 3 games, you got to, find a way to regroup and get back on track. You can't let it snowball, over the course of a long season. So learning how to lose, that's what he's talking about, is perspective.
And we're also talking, Trent, about the individual losses, not so much just the team, because as a hitter, you're losing all the time, right? And then as a defender, when you do make an error, because if you're playing not to make errors, you will make more errors than not. So the master infielder, the guy that dominates the dirt, he has this freedom. He's not even consumed or concerned with making an error. He learns to eliminate that from his vocabulary. And when Michael Jordan would talk about making shots, he said, I never, ever thought about missing a shot, ever. And I do miss them, but I don't think about that. See, I control my focus. Michael is an elite thinker. That's one reason why he was the greatest of all time. Not only because he's talented, but he is an elite thinker, because there's a lot of guys in the league that have the talent of Michael Jordan. Throughout the years since he's played, there's unbelievable talent, right? But they're not elite thinkers. When you think about making mistakes, you're going to make more. It creates tension, and we lose all the time in this game. And the point that you made is right on. I just want to bring out the point about the individual, because the individual loses from swiping bags. I mean, even if you take I was looking at some of the first rounders when we were going on our trip this weekend. We're looking at tons of first rounders and guys that are in the big leagues right now that were first rounders, second rounders, third rounders, and looking at how many times they stole bases in college, how many times they struck out, what was their batting average. And you go, man, when these guys are playing, like we talked about, with great parity in the Pac-12 or the ACC or any of these power conferences, right? I mean, you're going to get thrown out. And if you don't learn how to lose now, you know what happens when you lose in college? You struggle and you find yourself struggling.
I think that's another nugget that we need to throw in there, is that when you do struggle, internally, like ultimately you have to figure this all out within yourself. You're not always going to have a cheerleader or somebody that's going to give you permission. You're going to play for different coaches that treat you different ways and you have to learn to operate within the realm of all that. You're not going to find the perfect coach out there that says all the right things and does all the right things. Ultimately, it all boils down to your mental toughness, you know, your heart, your ability to handle the tough times. And you grow over time. And if you have the right people feeding information to you, I think, like Nate said earlier, it speeds up that curve tremendously. Like I think when you can say to a player, okay, you are struggling. So what are you doing about it? You still being a good teammate? You still playing with energy? You still playing with focus? You still preparing? Or, have you thrown in the towel? Is it woe is me? Are you coming in the dugout making excuses? Nobody wants to be around that kind of guy. And when you're struggling, which we all do, and when I say struggling, I mean like things are going bad. You're in one of those moments where, 3, 4, 5 games in a row, things are really boiling badly for you. When you can stay even keel, be a good teammate, play with energy, help on defense, find a way to contribute, whatever it is. When things finally start going back better for you, Nate, I think the respect element by your teammates is off the charts. Like, this is the
Right.
guy here. I mean, look at how he and when you get a bunch of guys like that, I mean, it's really beautiful, and you can truly lift one another up that way. So
Right. So when we were
yeah.
talking about the law of thirds earlier, I want to kind of change the twist on it. And when we talk about the law of thirds, we talk about the 11:54, 11 of the starts, the major league pitcher is going to struggle. 11, he's going to feel great. 11, he's going to feel terrible, or he's going to feel just okay. And then we talk about the 54, right? So 54 games times 3, it's 162. So Mike Trout's going to feel very uncomfortable and not good out of 54 of those games. Well, let's talk about the other law, the component of the law of thirds, which is basically a third of the time you're either in trouble. So Mookie Betts right now is in trouble. Okay. The other third of the time, you're getting out of trouble. So Bellinger right now feels like he's coming out of trouble, right? So you're either in trouble, getting out of trouble, or heading for trouble. See, adversity is coming. There's no way around it. And once we start to change our expectations, right? You show up, you expect the dirt to be nice, and they didn't drag it, and it's not watered, right? And you get a bad hop in the first inning, and you're all salty, and you can't focus. And then the backdrop's tough, and you can't see, and the guy throws you 3 sliders in a row, and you're like, what's going on here? I get 3 sliders in a row. I can't see the ball, and I got bad dirt, and then I got a bad hop, right? And you're bothered. You are affected. You cannot be affected, and you have to literally practice being the Rock. You have to practice it. And if we're not teaching it right now, players should be listening. If we're not teaching it, what happens is they go through their career and they try to figure it out when they're coaching. You have to figure it out right now. You cannot be concerned and you cannot be affected. And that's the great challenge for each player. And as coaches, what we're talking about basically is building perspective in the mind of the player. And one of the best ways to do this is just go right to Sports Century. And when you have your players, your son, your daughter, your players, have them listen and watch Sports Century. You can pick any athlete you want from any sport. They have biographies on all of them, and they tell you every lesson that they learn. You got Hank Aaron, you got Pete Rose, you got them all. You got Michael Jordan, you got any athlete in any sport. You just pick the best of the best, and they will take you through their journey in 30 minutes. And when you talk about being at another level, living at another level, these players gain perspective because they go, man, Pete Rose struggled with that, but then he figured it out. And I had my nephew, I've been telling him for 3 years, my other nephew who's a pitcher, I said, you need to buy Nolan Ryan's pitching book. You need to learn about the best. They're going to tell you every mistake they made and every way they adjusted and everything that worked for them. And it took him 4 years literally to buy it. 4 years for me reminding him regularly. And that's the immaturity of a young mind. So you have to literally, I don't live with him, so it's a little bit harder. But we need to find ways, and you talked about it, over a year ago with me about how you would call hitting coaches that were your buddies with major league teams, and you put it on speaker, and Tabor's in the car, and you're driving to his travel ball game, and Tabor just has the opportunity to listen. That's the same thing as watching, a documentary. You're learning from the best. And so we need to be creative thinkers, because this stuff you cannot take for granted. The 6 tool, you cannot take it for granted. Being a great teammate, you cannot take it for granted. And I'll tell you, it's one of the points, it's one of the boxes we check as scouts and college coaches. Great teammates, guys you can rely on. Mental makeup, how do you respond? How do you respond to your teammates? And I was asking Jabin some stories about this. I asked him the other day, I said, is there any pitchers that were, hard on you? He says, yeah, last year, our number 1, this is his high school team. He says, I remember one game distinctly. Second inning, I make a diving play, throw the guy out. He just takes the ball. He didn't tip his hat and say, "Hey, nice job, Javen. Nice play, man. Way to pick me up." He said nothing. The next inning, Javen made an error. It was the second error of the whole season, right? He makes an error and he gives him the dirty look, stink eye. In Hawaii, they call it stink eye, brother. He gave him the stink eye. And I'll tell you what, pitchers are probably the most selfish players on the field, and it's understandable because they have their own record they're concerned about. It's not just the team; they have their own record. So pitchers, self-centered pitchers. So we have one guy on our travel ball team. They were just in Fort Myers for the Perfect Game. It was the Jupiter event, the biggest event Perfect Game puts on, right? We have one guy that's probably going to be a first rounder. So a 95, he comes off the mound. Javen tells me, he goes up to him and says, "Hey, nice job, great inning." The guy looks at him and just walks away, literally. But this is common. And I was telling him, I go, "Javen, being a great teammate is hard to find. It is hard to find." And we were with scouts this weekend. I was talking to multiple major league scouts, and they talked about leadership. They said it doesn't exist. I'm like, why? They go, "In the big leagues, you can't find it. It's hard to find anywhere." Coaches, parents, players develop these qualities. You can start today and work on your leadership skills.
And how you handle adversity, to me, is a huge definer of leadership. And Nate, everything to me, like, boils down to this. Okay. Like, it was my keyword. You ask at camp, everybody what their keyword, key phrase is, and I tell you mine is compete. It's always been compete, because that's all I want to do on each and every pitch is just compete. It's all I have control over. I didn't say be perfect. I didn't say, anything other than competing. To me means bringing energy, focus, okay, competitiveness into, the battle. What's the worst thing that can happen? I talk to teams all the time. I was talking to our softball team at our high school. What's the worst thing that happens when you fail? You lose. I mean, you don't die. The sun comes up the next day. So why don't we change the mindset? Instead of fearing success, let's go compete. It's like people are afraid to almost get in that arena. Go compete, put it all on the line. What's that poem about being in the arena? Being in the arena. It's an amazing poem, and I should know it verbatim, but I don't right now. And it's the credit belongs to the person that's in the arena, right? That's what the poem is about. And it's like, you're gonna fail sometimes. So what? Let's just go compete. Boil it down to this simple, I'm looking at my pitcher in the state championship, Corbin Mueller, and I'm yelling from the dugout, compete, because I knew the pressure was so. We had never won a state championship in our high school before. We never came close to winning one when I first took over as a head coach. We had played for one 4 years earlier. Now we're there again, and 3/4 of the stands is the opposing team. We're 6 hours from our hometown, down by where the other team's from. We won game 1. We're playing in game 2. We got them on the ropes. They got the tie and run on second in the last inning. We're up by 1, 2 outs. And I'm just screaming at Corbin, compete. Just compete. Grab that ball and compete. That's all I expect. Win, lose, or draw. When you compete, I'm going to shake your hand. I'm going to hug you. I'm going to say, atta boy, atta girl. Because to me, that's what it boils down to. Literally, if, that works for me as a coach. And it works for a lot of my players when I just sell the compete element and just get after it. Because you've already prepared. You've already prepared. Yeah.
And just that last 2 minutes that you just said, I mean, that should be, like a statement for every coach. That should be a part of like their motto, because what you said there just gave everybody freedom to play. Win, lose, draw, it doesn't matter. And once you start removing, we have to win. We don't have to do nothing except compete. Right. The results will take care of themselves. And creating that perspective, giving that freedom, that's where players reach peak performance, because they're at their highest their frequency. They're playing with belief. They're playing without doubt. They're playing without fear. And that's where players need to be. And that's the most beautiful place, because one, we enjoy the game. It's actually an enjoyable game. But most players don't. I didn't enjoy half the games I played because I'm always focused on. It's like, dude, just compete. Focus on results. Focus on this. And, I made a mistake. It's like, that's not fun. In the
Right.
DR, they have this freedom. It's the most beautiful thing you ever seen. I've never seen one Dominican parent ever, there's no drive homes because they don't have cars, half of them. So they don't drive home and they don't yell at anybody in the car and there's no checklist. To their fault, they don't they don't critique enough. I mean, they could do a better job, but there's this beautiful freedom of enjoying the game. And we have a tendency not to enjoy the game. I think even with our jobs, we have a tendency not because we're trying to get through the day. We got to get done. We're always focused on the end. How about enjoying the moment? And when what you just said was awesome, giving them the freedom, guys, just go compete. And you actually give your son that freedom and he feels it. Robinson, the Hall of Famer, can't believe I can't remember his first name. Robinson.
Jackie Robinson?
No, the other one, Frank Robinson.
Frank
So
Robinson.
you got Frank Robinson, and Frank said, when the game is over, you should feel every game when the game is over as if you just got done wrestling a bear. That's what we're talking about. Wrestling a
Better
bear.
compete when you're wrestling against a bear, I can tell you that, or it won't be
Let's
a good
go.
ending. All right, you want to close us off with the camps?
I think-
Next camp. What do you got? What do you want to share?
Yeah, I would like to just reiterate that the mental game needs to be practiced daily. And I'm going to give you guys 3 takeaways because the mental game needs to become, a part of your life. You train the brain daily. We go to the mind gym every day. And it's very easy to do because you don't literally have to go into a room and lay down and like have meditation. You don't have to do that. It's how you respond. It's response and recovery. So the question is how do you respond and recover every single day when things go wrong? And I'll tell you, I've been using all the stuff that I teach. I've been using it for the last probably 10 years and it's changed my life. And I've been getting better at it because like Trent, when I played, I was just like you. I was too hard on myself, like most players are, right? We lack perspective. We don't have the freedom to fail. Failures are part of the process. Once you start to accept that, you don't even care anymore, right? So I'm going to give the players just a couple acronyms to write down, parents and players. And this is the challenge. The challenge is for you to memorize them. Go to the mind gym during the mindless times of the day. It's the mindless times, brushing your teeth, making your bed, emptying the trash, going on drives, okay? Going out, mowing the lawn, whatever you're doing where your mind is just wandering to nothing. Don't put your ear pods in and listen to music. I want you to work on memorizing acronyms and phrases. And what you do is you retrain your brain and you also learn how to trick the brain. So when things go wrong, I'm just going to give you guys a very simple one. Okay. We got the NGUA. That's the never give up attitude. NGUA. SWDC. So what? Don't care. So what? Now what is SWNW? It's the SWDC, SWNW, JHWLI attitude. It's the just how we like it attitude. I never give up ever. When something goes wrong, it's so what, don't care, because that is the game. And then I go, so what, now what? Now what's next? This pitch is next. This pitch is next. I'm totally committed to this pitch because this is just how we like it. JHWLI is just how we like it. Whatever the situation, circumstances, Walker Buehler, bases loaded, no outs, it's just how we like it. When his mind is right, so what, don't care. So what, now what? This pitch. And he's committed to each pitch, one pitch at a time. You know what happens? It's lights out. And he got his mind there because he was already there, he said. But early in his career, he was not able to get there. And many players don't have the opportunity to come back to the World Series. And fortunately, he was. And I'm going to finish it with this. You say CTC, control the chaos. Control it. You control it. And control the controllables. IBP is I'm bulletproof. ETS is I'm the eye of the storm. You can't phase me. You can't shake me. You can't move me. And I'll tell you, today alone, I had like 5 things go wrong. And the first thing I said once something went wrong was, you can't phase me. I'm bulletproof. I'm the eye of the storm. You know what happens immediately? Your focus is changed. You're present and you're unfazed. It's powerful. Self-talk is so powerful, but you have to practice it. You don't have to memorize those 15 acronyms. You could just go with 3 of them. You can go with SWDC, SWNW. Very simple. So what, don't care. So what, now what? 12-second bounce back. What do you got, Trent?
Love it all. I want to challenge the people when something's going wrong to smile. That's one of the things, that you shared with me that has stuck with me is when things are going wrong, smile. The endorphins, you can't be mad and smile at the same time. It's like almost impossible, maybe literally impossible. I'm not sure the science behind it, but smile, just like little.
I've been doing that, Trent.
With a lot of big leaguers, you see them like literally, like you're like, why is he smiling? There's nothing to be smiling about. You know what I mean? Like because he's probably shaking it off and working on his sixth tool, like his bounce back. And, everybody does it a little bit different. So go compete.
I was in the DR, going to the DR 3 weeks ago, and the Dominicans, they're not big flyers because they don't fly a lot. And so we're going back to the Dominican, and a lot of them come from New York or Florida, and they're going home. And when turbulence hits, man, they're getting disrupted. Okay, they're not comfortable, right? And so I don't think anybody likes major turbulence. So, but what I've been doing, anytime the turbulence hits, I smile, and literally there's no tension. It's unbelievable, and you're like totally relaxed. You're just smiling, and everybody else is freaking out, and you're in a great place. And Tom House talks about that. He said, put your glove over your face, and I want you to smile after you just gave up a home run. Relax, smile, and then get your game face back on, and let's go.
That's awesome. Well, hopefully everybody will go, if they're not already, watch the World Series and watch it like a player. Put yourself in those scenarios, and learn to make better decisions, some baseball IQ and, situational awareness and all of these amazing things. And remember that pressure is self-inflicted. It's a man-made thing, but obviously these guys probably putting some pressure on themselves, and it's very easy for us on a computer to say, don't feel that pressure, but it is a self-inflicted thing, pressure. And so if you're not watching us live, if you're coming back after the World Series, we'll be talking some more about the World Series, I'm sure, next week on Trosky Tuesday. And visit us this weekend at XM Radio, channel 211, the Dan Patrick channel. Me and Nate will be on. We have some guests. We'll share those coming up. And then Manjero Mondays. So my Facebook page, Winning Baseball, Nate with, I was thinking Tabor was on the show tomorrow, this weekend. So he was on my mind, but Trosky Baseball with Trosky Tuesday. So you got both of our Facebook channels with content. Visit us on Twitter, shoot us a tweet, an inbox, and we hope to see you at Camp North Hall. We're fired up about Atlanta on November 7th and 8th. We'll see you there. Good night, bro. You good?
All right. I'm good. See you, pal.
See you.
Thank you, Tony. Thank you, Trent.
Thanks, Tony.